Hey everyone, welcome to a deep dive into the world of rhetoric. Now I know what you're thinking. Dusty old textbooks, boring lectures.
Well, it's funny you should say that because one of the biggest misconceptions about rhetoric is that it's this, well, stuffy and irrelevant subject.
But it's so much more than that, isn't it?
Exactly. The research we're diving into today really drives home the point that rhetoric is all around us. It's not just about grand speeches. It's woven into the fabric of our everyday communication.
So we're talking about how we convince a friend to see a movie or even how we phrase a simple question, right?
Absolutely. It's about influence, persuasion, and that happens on a much more subtle level than most people realize.
Okay, so walk me through this. How does rhetoric actually work? What makes it tick?
At its core, it's about understanding how language shapes thought, belief, and ultimately action. But it's not just about the words themselves, it's a whole package.
The whole package.
Exactly. Tone of voice, body language, even the structure of your argument, they all play a role.
It's like we've all had that experience where we instinctively adjust how we speak depending on who we're talking to or what we want to achieve. That's rhetoric in action.
Right, precisely. It's almost subconscious at times. But once you're aware of these mechanisms, these tools of rhetoric, you can start using them more consciously and effectively.
So like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad, I imagine.
Exactly. That's a key theme that emerges from the research. This distinction between, as it calls it, legitimate versus illicit uses of rhetoric.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break that down for me. What's the difference?
So legitimate rhetoric is about using these persuasive techniques for ethical purposes. Think about educators explaining a complex concept in a way that's both clear and engaging, or activists advocating for social justice with well-reasoned arguments. It's about informing, inspiring, creating positive change.
And illicit rhetoric is the flip side of that coin.
Right. Think propaganda, misleading advertising, manipulation in personal relationships. This is where that critical thinking element becomes so crucial.
Because knowledge is power, right? So we've established that rhetoric is everywhere, more than just fancy words. But at its core, what's its primary function? What's it all about?
Persuasion. At its core, rhetoric is about understanding how to effectively persuade an audience.
And this is where things get really interesting, right? Because our research dives into those classic persuasive appeals. Logos, pathos, and ethos.
Ah, yes, the timeless trio. They might sound a bit intimidating, but they're really just fancy terms for some very fundamental principles of persuasion.
So for those who, like me, need a little refresher course in Ancient Greece 101, let's break those down. Logos, that's all about appealing to logic and reason, right?
You got it. It's about constructing a sound argument, using evidence, data, logical reasoning, building a solid foundation for your persuasive case. Think of the problem-solution-benefit framework, for example. Clearly identify a problem, present your solution, and then highlight the benefits. Logical, easy to follow.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, pathos, that feels a bit more, well, emotionally driven.
Exactly. Pathos is about connecting with your audience on an emotional level, using powerful imagery, compelling storytelling, even humor. These are all tools that can evoke feelings and create a connection with your message.
Like those ASTCA commercials, the ones with Sarah McLachlan's song, man, those get me every time.
See? Pathos in action. They leverage the power of emotion to elicit a visceral response. Now, while pathos can be incredibly effective, it's also important to be mindful of the ethical implications. The goal isn't to manipulate or exploit emotions, but to connect with your audience authentically.
It's about persuasion, not manipulation.
Right. So what about ethos? This one's always seemed a bit less straightforward to me.
Ethos is all about credibility, trustworthiness. You're more likely to be persuaded by someone you perceive as knowledgeable, reliable, ethical.
Right, absolutely. Like, if I'm getting car advice, I'm going to listen to a mechanic, not, say, my dentist, even if my dentist has strong opinions on cars.
Precisely. That's ethos in action. Establishing your authority on a topic, highlighting your experience, demonstrating your integrity. So you've got these three appeals logos, pathos and ethos, all working together to create a persuasive argument. Pretty fascinating how it all comes together.
It is, and what's even more fascinating is how often we do this instinctively. Think about a time you were trying to convince a friend to do something, maybe try a new restaurant. How did you approach that conversation?
Oh man, I do this all the time. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to convince my friends to try this new ramen place downtown, right?
Okay.
First, I'll probably, lay on the pathos a bit.
Okay.
Like, guys, I am craving ramen, like seriously deeply craving it, really play up the emotion.
Appealing to that sense of shared experience.
Classic pathos.
Exactly. And then I might sprinkle in a little logos like, this place has incredible reviews online, and it's supposed to be authentic, not that instant ramen stuff.
There you go. Backing up that initial emotional appeal with some evidence, you're appealing to their sense of reason. Right. And then to seal the deal, hit them with the ethos. My foodie friend Sarah, the one who's like always traveling for the best food, she said, this place is a must try.
Brilliant. Invoking the authority of a trusted source. It's remarkable how effortlessly you can weave these rhetorical techniques into a casual conversation.
See, I never even realized. I had no idea I was such a natural rhetorician. But this all connects back to this idea that rhetoric is inherent in language itself, right? Like the research we looked at, it almost suggested that you can't not use rhetoric if you're using language at all.
That's a key insight from the material. Even the simplest act of communication carries with it some degree of persuasive intent, however subconscious it may be. We're always trying to convey meaning, to influence understanding, to elicit a response, even if it's as simple as, getting someone to agree with us.
So even something as simple as asking my roommate to take out the trash, there's rhetoric happening there.
Absolutely. The way you phrase that question can subtly influence their response. You could say, hey, did you happen to take out the trash? Or just wondering if you had a chance to take out the trash yet. Same basic question, but with different undertones, right?
Oh, yeah. The first one, it sounds more like, just a straightforward question. But the second one, it kind of feels a bit softer, maybe even implying they should have done it already.
Exactly. The way we structure our sentences, the words we choose, our tone of voice, these are all rhetorical choices that shape how our message is received and interpreted.
So even when we're not consciously trying to persuade someone, we're still making choices that influence how they interpret what we're saying. It's like this hidden layer of communication.
Precisely. And it goes beyond just language, too. The research argues that nonverbal cues, body language, facial expressions, it all plays a role.
Oh, right. Like a raised eyebrow can say 1,000 words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A confident stance, a warm smile, even a firm handshake. These are all tools of persuasion, even without a single word being spoken.
It's like in those courtroom dramas when they bring in body language experts to analyze witnesses. Like, can you tell if someone's lying based on how they scratch their nose?
While, those techniques can be interesting, it's important to remember that body language analysis isn't an exact science. There's no single tell that definitively reveals deception. Context is crucial. Body language is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Okay, so not a foolproof system, but it does highlight how much of our communication is happening beneath the surface.
Exactly. And that's part of what makes rhetoric so fascinating. It's about decoding these subtle cues, these persuasive strategies that are shaping our interactions on both conscious and subconscious levels.
It's like this hidden language we're all speaking without even realizing it. And once you start to understand it, you see it everywhere. Advertising, politics, our everyday conversations.
Precisely. And that's why these sources you brought to my attention, I find them so valuable. They offer a fresh perspective on this ancient art, really making it relevant and accessible to everyone.
And that's the goal, right? Becoming more aware of how language is being used all around us, whether to shape our perceptions or influence our decisions. But beyond just recognizing these tactics, how can understanding rhetoric make us more effective communicators ourselves?
Now, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something that the research delves into in depth, exploring how honing your rhetorical skills can make you a more persuasive leader, a more compelling storyteller, a more effective advocate for the causes you care about. It's about harnessing the power of language to make a difference in the world.
So we've been talking about rhetoric as this tool for persuasion, but it's bigger than just winning arguments, right? I mean, the research we've been looking at, it suggests that rhetoric is a key player in everything from like leadership and social change to even just navigating our personal relationships.
It is. It's absolutely essential in those areas. Let's take leadership, for example. Think about any truly influential leader throughout history. Their ability to inspire, to mobilize, to get people on board with their vision. It all comes down to rhetoric.
So it's not just about like having authority, it's about how you communicate that authority and connect with people.
Exactly. It's about using language to motivate, to build consensus, to foster that sense of shared purpose. And that's relevant whether you're leading a company, a movement, or even just, a team project at work.
And that makes me think about something that the research really emphasized, which is this idea of adapting your communication style to different audiences to different contexts, right?
Mhm.
What works for one group might not land the same way with another. You got to know your audience.
Absolutely. It's like that old saying, you can't catch fish with the same bait every time. A skilled communicator understands their audience, their values, their beliefs, their emotions, and they tailor their message accordingly.
So, like, if I'm trying to get my team at work excited about a new project, I probably wouldn't use the same approach as I would with, say, my skeptical uncle when we're talking about, I don't know, the latest scientific discovery.
Exactly. With your team, you might focus on shared goals, a positive impact to the project, maybe even a little bit of, healthy competition. Whereas with your unker, you might need to start by establishing common ground, appealing to his sense of logic and reason, citing credible sources of information.
So it's about speaking their language, meeting them where they are.
Yes, and it highlights how important it is to be observant, to pay attention to those subtle cues your audience is giving you. Are they engaged, skeptical, bored? A skilled rhetorician can read the room and adjust their approach on the fly.
And speaking of reading the room, this all ties into social change as well. I mean, the research talked about how rhetoric has been so instrumental in movements for social justice, for equality throughout history.
Absolutely. Think about pivotal moments like Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, or the suffragettes fighting for women's right to vote, or even the early days of the labor movement. Rhetoric has always been this powerful tool for challenging the status quo, for advocating for a more just and equitable world.
Yeah, because it's not just about changing laws, it's about changing hearts and minds,
Yeah.
right? And that takes persuasive communication.
Exactly. It's about crafting compelling narratives, appealing to shared values, mobilizing people around a common cause. And it's a reminder that rhetoric is not just this, abstract academic concept. It has real-world implications. It has the power to create meaningful change.
So with all of that said, all of this amazing stuff we've unpacked about rhetoric, what's like one key takeaway, one thing our listeners can start doing today to kind of harness this power of rhetoric in their own lives?
If I had to choose just one, it would be this. Cultivate awareness. You're now tuned in to the subtle ways that rhetoric shapes communication. Start paying attention. Notice how politicians use it, advertisers, even your friends and family. Question your own assumptions. Are you being swayed by a compelling argument? Or is it clever manipulation?
It's like that moment in the Matrix, right? Once you see the code, you can't unsee it. And with rhetoric, once you start noticing these patterns, you start to understand how much language shapes your perceptions, how it shapes the world around you.
Exactly. Become a more critical thinker. Be a more discerning listener. Be a more effective communicator yourself.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I mean, it's really amazing to see how relevant this ancient art still is in our modern world.
It really is. It speaks to the enduring power of language
Yeah.
to inform, to inspire, to create lasting change.
So to all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has helped you see this art of persuasion in a whole new light and that you can use your own voices with more intention, with more impact. Until next time, everyone.